So, Ren, what are we going to unpack in today's episode?
Well, this is all about super through the ages. And I think it...
Gold age. Wait.
Here we
Bronze
go.
age.
Yeah. What other ages are
Ice age. Iron age.
there? Yeah.
Gold age isn't one, is it?
I don't think so. There was
No.
iron, bronze.
Bronze.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Stone.
I've derailed it again.
Middle age,
Middle
which is
age,
kind
yes.
of relevant here because
Yes.
when you're in your middle ages is when a lot of people start thinking about super.
Yep.
And we're saying think about it as early as possible. Anyway, let's get back on track because the first question we want to answer is how do you know if you are on track?
With your balance.
With your super.
Yeah.
Are you doing what you need to do at the age that you are to get where you want to be?
Yep.
The follow up to that, and then where we want to go on this episode is what should you do and what can you do if you feel like you're not on track? Mm-hmm. We're going to share some tips and some resources to help you feel like you're back on the right path. And then finally, we're going to go decade by decade and talk about what you should do at different stages in your life.
Nice.
So a lot to cover.
Nice. Looking forward to this. The first part is how do we know if we're on track? But before we get there, we need to address the fact that the great unknown with all of this is how much we're actually going to need when we retire.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the starting point to know if you're on track or not, is to know where you want to get to. And the great unknown, as we've touched on every episode in this series, is you just don't know what you're going to need when you retire. And there's a number of reasons for that. The value of money is questionable because of inflation. Who you are is going to be different. Your family situation is unknown. Your hobbies and your interests are going to be different. There's this psychological phenomenon. It's called the end of history illusion. And essentially, if you think about yourself 10 years ago, so for you, that would be Bryce Lesky in his early 20s at uni. And you think about how much...
Great time.
You think about how much you've changed from there. And, you know, everyone, if you think 10 years ago to now, you've changed so much. But then if you think about yourself in 10 years, you think that you're not going to change much. Essentially, the illusion is that we are who we are going to be. But the fact of life is that we are going to keep changing at that rate throughout our lives. And so projecting forward who we're going to be in retirement is near impossible because of this end of history illusion.
Such a fascinating mental exercise.
I know.
Yeah, you move through life not recognizing how much you're changing, I think. And then you look back and you're like, wow, who was I back then?
Yeah. Look at how much hair I had back then.
Yeah. So I guess how does that then play into forecasting to not only 10 years' time, but in our situation, 40 years' time?
Yeah.
That makes it incredibly difficult for us to really think about what is that goal that I'm working towards for a retirement, and what is subsequently the number that I need.
So one way to think about it, and it's a super general rule of thumb, is you want to replace between 66 and 80% of your pre-retirement income.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of say, all right, well, I'll be retirement ready when I can cover that through, you know, maybe it's from income from your investments from super. Maybe you've got an investment property and you're getting rental from that. Maybe you're going to work part-time and that's going to be part of your transition to retirement plan, whatever it is. But one way you can say, all right, I'm retirement ready when I've got that replacement rate. There is another way, which I don't love, but it's kind of like the best of a set of bad options, which is you can compare yourself to averages at different stages in life.
As in compare your super balance and like your expenditure and those sorts of things?
No, not your expenditure, but you can say like all the super funds and I think the government even, definitely the super funds will publish lists of here's the average super balance at different ages.
Yeah. Sometimes comparison is the thief of joy, as they say.
It is,
Yes.
it is.
However, we are going to do exactly that and go through some of the key age brackets and have a look at where the average sits for both male and female, and then that will give you an opportunity to compare you to that average.
Yeah. Now, it's important to stress that averages when it comes to finance always skew higher.
Yes.
Because the super high balances
Blow it out of the water.
drag the average up. That's, you know, why like the average salary in Australia is about $98,000 a year, but the median salary is $67,000 a year.
Yeah.
So the same effect will play out here. But these are averages. These numbers are from Deloitte. So let's go through them. Should also say they split out men and women because like one of the sad realities of Australian finance is there is a big superannuation gap.
So, Ren, we're just going to go for the start of each decade, so we're not throwing too many numbers, but we can also include a link in the show notes to the table that we're going through here. So let's go. You've just started work, you're in your 20s, so 20 to 24-year-old. For men, the average balance is 16,400, and for women, it's 16,200. We then get to the 30 to 34s, 82,900 for men, 60,200 for women. In the 40s, so 40 to 44, 181,300 for men and 124,600 for women. 50 to 54 is 289,900 for men and 191,400 for female. And then in the final one is 60 to 64, 338,700 for men and 261,000 for female. So those are just the average balances for you to have a think about where you're sitting. But don't let this put you off, I think is the key here. This shouldn't be a negative. People start jobs at different times in their lives. Superannuation scales with your income and how much you earn, and there are ways to boost income and contributions that we'll speak about as well. So yeah, don't let this be a negative if you've heard that you are behind.
My big takeaway from those set of numbers is they are lower than I would have expected, especially in the older age brackets. You know, like 60 to 64-year-olds, men 338,000, women 261,000.
Yeah.
When, you know, throughout this series we've been talking about like $1 million is achievable.
Yeah.
A couple of things to take away is that, first of all, superannuation was introduced in 1992.
Yep.
So if you're a 65-year-old on this table, 64-year-old on this table, super's been around for 32 years.
Yeah.
So it would have been introduced when you were in your mid-30s.
Yeah.
So you've just got to keep that in mind with balances. The other really important thing to keep in mind is that over time, the superannuation guarantee amount has gone up. Even in our working lifetime, it's gone from 9% of our salary to 11% of our salary. But when it was first introduced in 1992, do you want to have a guess at how much it was? 3%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or 4% for employers with an annual payroll above $1 million.
I mean, this is another lever the government could pull over time as well. Make the compulsory contributions significant.
It's going to 12 and a half, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that was over a 5-year period or something like that. But
yeah. So when you think about it, you know, like that is also a reason why people who started 30 years ago, like those balances might seem a bit low compared to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
But it doesn't shake my confidence that for someone who's in their 20s or 30s today and is contributing 11% of their salary and it's growing for a 30 or 40 year period, like the numbers that we've been speaking about, $1 million plus,
absolutely achievable.
are achievable.
Yeah. So comparing yourself to others is one way of understanding if you're on track, but there are a couple of other ways that are probably a little bit less, I guess, you're comparing to yourself, not others. That is setting a goal and working towards that. We've spoken about knowing your number or figuring out your replacement rate, but that is one way that you can look and say, am I on track to hit this goal?
Yep.
If I'm not, can I contribute more? If I am, great.
How do you consider if you're on track?
I don't consider if I'm on track.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And I know this is silly.
Talk to that.
What I think about most is, am I set up right now in the most effective way possible?
Yeah, okay. So it's more about the inputs than the outcome.
Yeah, because I'm confident that if I have the right fee structures, the right fund, and as I said in episode 1, I am reviewing my super at the moment because I reckon I can do better. But if I'm confident with the setup, then I'm kind of like, you know, the additional things I can do, I'll do a little bit later in life, i.e. add more. I don't necessarily look at numbers and say, I'm 33 years old, the average is this. Because the reality is, if I was below the average, I don't think I'd think I'd do much different.
You wouldn't do additional contributions?
I don't think so right now,
Why is that?
because I think the money that I've got going into investments outside of super additionally are going to enjoy the effects of 40 years of compound, and yeah.
You don't want the tax benefit though?
Well, it's the hard thing for me to actually think about, because fortunately I'm not in the situation where, looking at these numbers, my super balance
Oh, must be nice.
is healthier than the bracket.
Yeah, righto. They should tax you more.
So I haven't had to think about it, but
Yeah.
but I'm trying. Like, yeah, it's what would you do? Like,
Oh, look, I recognize that I'm in a pretty good position right now. You know, recently got a mortgage, but before then didn't have a mortgage, don't have kids, was, you know, like I was in the sort of economic sweet spot of no family, no mortgage, no kids, where you probably could juice your super and contribute more. And I still do think about it. It's like, if I really was like, I'm going to contribute a heap in my early 30s before I have kids, it would be the financially rational thing to do. It would be the best financial decision I could ever make for my life, because then for the rest of my life, I would be ahead. I would have put money in early, and it would compound over time. I recognize all of that, but I just haven't actioned it yet.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do want to balance the money that I have in super and outside of super, so I don't just have choice when I retire, but I have choice throughout my life and up to retirement. And so that is also a consideration for me. But for example, if I got a windfall, if one of these lottery tickets that we buy occasionally pays off, like, I would definitely put more into super.
yeah, I'm kind of the same.
Yeah. But for me, to go back to the question that I asked you, which is, how do I think about if I'm on track?
Yeah.
For me, I sort of put a big number up in lights. I don't think about it too much, but like, for me, it's like $1 million. I don't know if that's too much or not enough for retirement. It's you know, it's hard to know. But for me, it's like $1 million, not accounting for inflation, you know, gives you 40,000 in annual income. That feels like enough to be okay. Probably not a super comfortable retirement, but okay. Obviously all in today's dollars. And if you get to that point, you're doing okay. And then it's like, oh, maybe you've got more time and you can keep going, or maybe you don't get there, but you get close, but that's sort of what you're aiming for. And so, like, if I go on to the Money Smart superannuation calculator, that's sort of the number that I sort of, when I put my numbers in, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting around that number. I feel like I'm okay. That's how I know if I'm on track.
Are you actually on track?
Yeah. I'll
Do you know
say,
what I
like,
mean?
this is
Like-
what I've got now. This is what I think I'll be contributing for
Gotcha.
so I'm 31
Yeah.
for the next, call it 30 years. This is what I think the growth rate will be.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
You'll get there.
I feel like I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So the final way that you can also, well, I think you've just said it there, Ren. The final way to compare is actually to project forward and consider what that would look like in retirement. So what we mean here is plug your current balance in, project forward. What do you reckon your income's going to be? How much do you reckon you're going to be able to contribute over the next few years? What does that look like when you come to retirement age? Are you going to be happy with that? Do you think that's a number that you think you would be able to comfortably live with? That's another way of doing it. So we'll include the link to the Money Smart superannuation calculator in the show notes. But yeah, that's another way just to understand whether or not you're on track. Yeah. So Ren, that then begs the question, what do we do if we've compared to others, we've compared to our goal, or we've projected forward and we feel like we're not on track?
So there's 4 things that really are the starting points for if you're not on track. Here's what you can do to catch up. The first one is one everyone should do, whether you feel like you're on track or not, which is consolidate and find. Make sure all your super is in one place. And you can do that. We spoke about it in the last episode. The ATO have a Find My Super portal website. It's super easy to search. Make sure you do that. Make sure you consolidate, because you might be paying multiple fees and you want to consolidate all your super in one place and then let it compound as one.
Basics, absolute basics. There should be no reason that you don't do that. Second one is salary sacrifice up to the concessional rate. So what this means is you go to your employer and you say, I want to put in an extra 2% above what you're already contributing. And that goes in straight into your super fund before it hits your account. So it's pre-tax. You can also enjoy, I guess, the tax benefits of the concessional rate by doing an after-tax contribution, as in like Equity Mates pays me, it's in my account, and then I contribute more.
Yeah. That's the terminology there is slightly confusing because an after-tax contribution means something slightly different. But
in essence, Equity Mates pays me, and I can contribute up to the $27,500, and you'll still get the same tax benefit.
Yeah. So in your tax return, you'll get a tax refund.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The interesting thing there is if you did it as a salary sacrifice, the tax difference goes into your super account. You know, like you get taxed 15% rather than 32.5%. But if you do it as once your salary hits your account, you then do a concessional contribution, the tax difference isn't going in your super fund. It's going back to you in your tax return.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people do it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, that's the second one. A concessional contribution, either through salary sacrificing or once your pay hits your account, doing that concessional contribution. Now, there is a cap. It's $27,500 in this financial year that you can contribute to your super fund and get that 15% tax benefit. And so if people feel like they're behind, that is the best thing you can do to get back on track. Just contribute as much as you can, hit that concessional cap if you can afford it, and enjoy the benefits of that 15% tax rate.
Mm.
Yeah.
The third thing that you can do is make after-tax contributions above the concessional cap. However, you don't enjoy the same tax treatment of 15%.
Yeah. So that's where you pay your marginal tax, call it 32.5%. The money hits your account, and then you contribute more to super, and there's no tax benefit.
Yeah.
You can do up to 110,000 in after-tax contributions. That was the number. That was the limit in this financial year. So the question is, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just invest it yourself? There's probably two reasons. One is you getting that money into your super where you can't touch it is a good psychological, and like it stops you spending it or selling investments early. Like it forces you to embody good investing behavior. But psychologically, it also will make you feel like maybe you're on track or you're ahead of where you...
this is all in context of how do you catch up.
Yeah. So that's one reason you might do it. The second reason you will do it is because once money is in the superannuation environment, there are tax benefits. So even if it's an after-tax contribution and you don't get the tax benefit there, when your money's in the super environment and, it's earning dividends and it's selling investments and buying other investments, the tax treatment of money in super is generally taxed less than money outside of super. And so whilst the tax benefit might not be there from the contribution, over time, there's still a free kick that you're getting.
Yeah.
So that's number 3. So we've covered consolidate and find all your super, get it in one place, contribute more up to the concessional rate, contribute more in after-tax contributions. And then there's a final one that I think is really important and not discussed enough, because we've mentioned throughout this series one of the big discrepancies is the difference between male and female super balances. And like a big driver of that is generally women take more time out of the workforce for caring and parental responsibilities, and often their super falls behind.
Yeah.
But if you're a working parent and the caregiving parent isn't working, you can actually split your super contributions and make additional contributions for your spouse or for your partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they're on a period of leave or extended absence, it's definitely something I agree that is not spoken about enough.
Yeah. As with all things in super, it does get a little bit complicated. So I think if you are looking at doing it, it's certainly worth speaking to a financial advisor about how you can best structure it. But, we're certainly entering an age where a lot more of our friends are having kids, and kids are on the mind, and kids are in the group chat a lot more. So
Yes.
worth people who are in a similar situation to us thinking about that.
Yeah. Welcome back to Equity Mates. We are in our final episode of our superannuation series, thanks to Vanguard. We're looking at superannuation through the ages. And to close out this episode, we just want to talk about where superannuation could be or should be at different decades in your life, because everyone's superannuation journey is different, but there are some key sort of things that you should be thinking about and paying attention to depending on where you are in your life. So we'll start with the teenage years and the early 20s. And when it really starts here, ensuring that you're choosing the right fund, you've got it on the growth setting, you're avoiding multiple funds, and you're consolidating.
Yes.
That is it.
And the government are aware of the problem of multiple funds. And so they've introduced these new stapling laws, which should reduce the problem that we had when we were sort of doing part-time jobs, which was heaps of super funds.
Yeah.
It does create a slightly different problem, not as bad, but important, which is that if you choose a bad fund to begin with, a fund that's got high fees or that doesn't have great performance, that fund will be stapled to you until you make the choice to change.
Yes.
So I think the main thing, if you're starting out your working life or if your kids are starting out their working life, put the thought into just choosing a good super fund.
Yeah. And just to be clear here, stapling laws is where your super fund follows you until, as you said, you change it. So traditionally what would happen is I'd start at the cinemas when I'm 16. They would have a super fund. I'd then move to Woolies. They'd say, this is our super fund.
Mm-hmm.
I'd then move to another job. This is our super fund. And unless you are actively rolling everything up, you've now got 3 super funds.
Yeah. Or unless you are actively filling out the forms to say, this is my particular super fund. But it was so much easier just to tick the default employer's default super fund. Yeah. So that's the main thing in your teenage and early 20s. That then brings us to our 20s. And mid-20s to early 30s, you can often find yourself in a financial sweet spot. You're working full-time for the first time. You're earning a little bit more and you don't have a family, a mortgage, kids. This is your chance to save more and to go hard with extra contributions.
Hard when I'm at uni, though, wanting to just have fun.
For me, this is like the post-uni days. The uni is in that teenager and early 20s bracket where it's just like you're working, you're having fun, you're not thinking about super, you're not contributing more, and that's sweet. Just make sure that what you're contributing by law with the superannuation guarantee is going into a decent fund. But then it's like in your 20s, you
sorting your cash flow.
Bryce Lesky put on a suit for the first time and was like,
got the tie out, the hair back.
And I think for me there, it's like you're in a financial sweet spot, make additional contributions. If you don't want to make additional contributions, because like speaking personally, it wasn't front of mind for me, but we started investing. We started our investment portfolio and we used the fact that we're in our financial sweet spot to start figuring it all out.
Yeah, building wealth.
Putting money away, saving for a mortgage. I think also an important thing in your 20s, your late 20s, early 30s, the first home super saver scheme is a mouthful to say. It's a mountain of paperwork, I think, to access, but there's a big financial benefit if you do it.
Something I'd just paid zero attention to.
I tried to do it, and it honestly was too complicated for me.
Really?
Yeah, Flynn did it, I think, one of our mates, and I was asking him about it, and it was kind of like there wasn't like a quarantine section in your super fund that was like, here's your first home super saver scheme contributions. It's just all in the general pool. Yeah. And then you like apply to your super fund to pull parts of the general pool out. Yeah. And I was like, how am I accounting for what's there? How much have I got in the first home super saver scheme amount? And I was like, too hard.
Well, pay attention. So,
but learn from my mistakes because it is a financial free kick.
So then we hit our 30s, Ren. This is where, in most instances, it'll coincide with families for many people and mortgages. Maybe a mortgage.
Expenses creep.
Expenses are going. One parent might take paternity leave or extended time out of the workforce. So this is where you could think about, as we spoke about, splitting contributions. So that they're not falling behind, making sure your insurances are right within your super fund or even outside of your super fund, as we spoke about insurances in the previous episode. So it's not just about you anymore. This is the setting up for family.
Yeah, which is why insurance is important.
Yes,
because right now, like, if we died, Hopefully people would be sad, but no one would be financially worse off. Then we get to our 40s. And so for many, this decade is a real focus on super and growing the super balance. You can sort of see that retirement light at the end of the tunnel. And the question becomes, how am I going to get there? And so, you sort of see in the data, you see a big uptick in salary sacrificing and additional contributions in your 40s. And it's just about making sure you're on the right track. I haven't pulled this data, but I would confidently say there's a big uptick in people seeking financial advice.
Yeah.
And there's probably a couple of reasons for that. One is often people don't have the means when they're younger to see it. But also people are now thinking pretty solidly about like retirement is less like an ethereal idea and more like a fast approaching reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're in your 50s, you're getting closer to retirement, so you're starting to think about your investment mix. So growth is likely a little bit too risky.
And why would it be too risky?
Because you're at a time in your life where you don't have time on your side. If the market drops, the time it can take to recover, you could be well into your 60s in retirement age.
Yeah.
You need that. You need the capital to be safe. You need to be able to be drawing on it. So having it in an assets where it's defensive, more income focused, that's probably what you're thinking about when you're in that stage of life.
For me as well, it's like we're talking about this whole replacement rate. Like a lot of retirement planners are talking about 66 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. In your 50s and into your 60s is when you like turn those income settings on in your investing mix and you say, am I at 66%? And if I'm not, like, what do I need to do to get there? Like, that's when you start being, you're like in pre-retirement mode.
Definitely. Yeah. So those are some things to consider depending on which decade you're in. But that does bring us to the end of our super series, thanks to Vanguard. We've covered a lot. We've covered why superannuation and some of the things to consider there. We've gone through the toolbox with Aiden and then investing or then superannuation through the ages and how you can compare and ensure that you're on track, but more importantly, what you can be doing at each decade of your life to maximize superannuation.
Yeah. My final thought as we close out this series is it's never too late to do better. And wherever you are in your working life and however close you are to retirement, it's not too late to think about this and optimize as best you can, because all that we can all do is set ourselves up in the best situation. And if you put yourself in a bit better situation than you were going to be in by not doing the work, then you've given yourself more choice and more flexibility in your retirement. And, it might not be everything that you wanted. And, we'll often get messages saying, I wish I'd thought about my investing earlier. I wish I'd started listening to your podcast earlier. That doesn't get you anywhere. It's just about doing the best you can with where you're at and the tools at your disposal.